What are the ways in which networking takes place usually in a litigation setting for a litigator?
We've probably seen those really famous ads from America about like these ambulance chasers basically, and having like jingles about like come, we are the law firm which will get you these returns. And I think we can all agree that is not good.
Key part of this profession is helping those who are around you, and not just being I'll hog all the matters.
Chances of success, I think clients are realistic in the sense that they also know that there is nothing known as 100% case.
Maybe your clients.
Yeah, I don't know. At least the people I mean, like people are disillusioned with the system anyway. So.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Vaarta's litigation series. Today we have Abraham with us, who has 9 years of practice in the Supreme Court. He is a former journalist and also a chartered accountant by profession. Thank you so much, Abraham, for joining us.
Absolutely a pleasure.
Would you like to just introduce yourself? Some basic things we ask in the introduction is, are you a first generation lawyer? What other careers have you explored in the past? Why law? Etc. etc. What's your journey?
So I am as first generation as could be. Straight out of school, I started the CA course because accounting was something that I was good at in school. So I did CA. There was the foundation, and then there was the intermediate. And our articleship, which was 3 years of compulsory training, started after your intermediate. And it's only when I started my articleship that I realized that accounting is good as a subject, but I'm really not cut out to do accounting in life. But then I've also like come through half the journey in terms of passing like 2 of the toughest exams. So then at some point there was a bargain with my mother that, oh, you finish this and then family will not compel you to practice. Yeah. So that's what got me to finish my CA. It took me a couple of attempts, but I finished in 2009. And at that point, I was very clear that I wanted to be a journalist. And of course, remember, this was 2007-8 was when these ideas were like being formed in my head. And at which point, the only TV journalists in the country were Entrepreneurial and I think India Today had started. That was the time when Times Now, CNN, IBN had started. So like the descent of TV news in India had not started then. So anyway, I started immediately after my exam. I got a job at UTVI, as it was known then. Then it became Bloomberg UTV. So it was a good brand to be working with. I worked there for 3 years, and then I realized that maybe TV news is not giving me enough of expression to do space to do the kind of investigative journalism that I wanted to do. So then I joined a magazine, which is Business World, which at that point was under the Anand Bazar Patrika group. So I worked there. I was a proper investigative journalist for around 3 years. During that time, I was also pursuing law in Bombay in the Government Law College. Towards the end of the course, I started thinking, okay, should we now start try practicing law? And at that point, I hadn't done many internships. I didn't know much. I happened to be in Delhi. I went to one of the lawyers that I knew, mostly for the purpose of work, one Mr. Sanjay Parekh. I went and asked him, can I work with you for 6 months? Just to get a feel of the idea, of the office. At that point, he didn't have any juniors at that point. So he said, why don't you come over and work? Probably I was taking like a sixth of what my salary had gone down by maybe to a sixth of what it was. I worked with him for 6 months. I liked the law part of it. I didn't want to specialize in the practice areas that he had. So then I went and worked with another lawyer, Mr. Devashish Baruka, who's now a senior counsel, for 6 months again, because he had a good commercial law practice. So I did that. And so about a year after I started, which is by 2016 July, I think I took the decision to be on my own. Fairly early in my career, but again, like I had a lot of other people, fellow lawyers, who I would go to for advice. And one thing they said is, see, at some point you will have to start
Yeah.
And when you start, it is going to be from an empty plate. Not everybody has the privilege of having like a book before you start. So you might as well start. And of course, like I was also depleting my savings. So earlier the better. So I started. So I remember the person who told me this. He took me to one lawyer who had a pretty good practice, and he's now a judge in one of the high courts. This man was very generous. He gave me a brief to draft that very evening, and he was very happy with the fact that I returned gave him a good draft in a couple of days. So then over the next 3-4 years, every few months he would give me some work, and he would pay me well for those. And what I'm trying to say is the fact that there are these kinds of mentors earlier in your career who would not just give you work but also like pay you some money, it keeps you going, right?
Yeah.
So my first matter that I filed on my own was basically in the Supertech case.
That
The building,
home.
the builder. So one of my former bosses, he had a property there.
Oh.
He had a flat there. And so this is around 2 years after the whole, like the Supreme Court, I think the SLP was filed in the Supreme Court in 2014. Supreme Court had granted a stay. So by the time I filed this in 2016, the matters weren't really moving. And most of the lawyers for the home buyers, probably because the home buyers weren't paying them, they weren't coming. And I remember, so I had this one person that I was representing, but then I was the only lawyer on that side. So I would still get to make my submissions.
Yeah.
So for this person, and this then resulted with in the court directing Supertech to pay whoever the flat owners wanted to take their money out at that point. The court asked them to pay. So then my name came in the order.
Yeah.
And so people saw me. And then Supertech, in fact, Supertech litigation has kind of sustained my practice because every year I get like a bunch of cases from there and I still keep getting.
You're the home buyer lawyer.
Though I'm representing a few number of them, but because I'm still visible in that case, it has helped. And so it's things like this that really build your practice. So when I started, it was mostly a litigation practice. And I think when I started, I also wanted to be a litigating lawyer. That's the only thing I wanted to do. Probably because when I was studying, again, I was staying in YMCA in Bombay.
Yeah.
And half the people there were all lawyers and usually corporate lawyers.
Yeah.
And they would come back at 2:00 and I would see them like waking up at 7:00, brushing their teeth and getting ready and going to work like again at 8 and 9. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was very clear, I'm not joining a law firm. I'm not getting into a corporate law as such. Yeah. And then, so 2019, the pandemic starts. Litigation almost dwindles down because the courts are practically shut for the next year. And even when the courts reopened, because the high courts were also not functioning in a very full-fledged manner.
This is the time when VC was not really, it hadn't caught up.
So, I mean, we were just sitting at home, right? Not doing so much of work. That's when I started getting my first non-litigation work. So like, contracts to draft, policies to draft, general advice that people needed on different aspects of life. So over a period of time, that has also like become, I started realizing that I like doing that. My clients, then there were acquisitions that my clients were involved in. So then without really being a corporate lawyer, I started doing a lot of things that most corporate lawyers do. And these are things that, again, with a litigation background, because you know how these are cases, these are how cases ultimately end. So you're able to draft contracts in a way that are more pragmatic rather than strictly legal.
Correct.
And now I'm probably moving more towards focusing more on this corporate practice, simply for the reason that that is where you really get to preempt problems and give value in terms of helping people minimize the potential litigation that they can be part of. So that's where I'm focused. So there's been an evolution both in terms of type of careers as well as within law. But the way I see it, everything has led to the next.
Yeah, and it's actually fantastic to know that you were not really, because one would think that after having a career in journalism, today if you tell a law student that you've spent a few years in a different career, and now imagine somebody's switching careers and coming to law. Today's law students, I think, will dread that idea. It's because many of them also want to perhaps shift out from the law. or they think about pursuing a different career in, let's say, on the side, or maybe for a year before coming back to law. What's your advice to them?
Uh, some of my sympathies are with the law students because they also see that, I mean, just last week I was reading that one of the law firms are paying around 20 lakhs as fresher salaries.
Yeah.
It's hard to say no to that. But I would always say your first, especially your 20s, you can live the rough life. Like, you don't have to live in a fancy house at that point, right? Your socializing expenses are probably much lesser. Those are the years where you really should be experimenting. And in fact, when students and even young lawyers ask me, I said, see, you can't know for sure whether litigation is your thing. I can tell you, like, these are the issues that you'll face as a litigator. And you might think that, oh, I'm great. I mean, these are the challenges I want to embrace. But it's when you start that you realize that this doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Or it's possible that, again, like I said, like, I thought I didn't like corporate law. And today I realize that that is the kind of law that I would like to do, right? So, and the only way to do it is by trying it out. So try out things. Don't even, like, for example, if you spend like 2 years doing something, you can switch, no problem. You can't do that like once you're like in your mid 30s and you're 40. I can give you examples of people who've done it and done it successfully, but it's better if you do it like in your 20s. So in your 20s, if you can just work under seniors or in different areas of law, whatever it is that you feel, and then take an objective look as to, is this what I really want to be doing? I think it's a good idea. The good thing is, especially in law, in litigation, I'm sorry, if you like, there's a lot of grunt work that you need to do. You're trailing the senior, you're probably not getting paid a lot of money. These are things that you can only do in your 20s. So you should do it in your 20s, what I feel.
Yeah, and a connected question from when you were speaking, it just reminded me. Many people sort of throw around this language that somebody is not cut out for litigation. Like you don't have the required mentality, temperament, the characteristics, the grit. I don't know what all is in their mind, but what do you make of this phrase that somebody is not cut out for litigation?
Okay, so I'm not sure. So again, this is something that has to be tried out on an individual basis. But let me try and answer this. And let me just tell you like what it is that I feel that as a litigator that you really need. Okay. Do you follow tennis?
No, not really.
Yeah. Anyway, so you still know the top 2-3 tennis players, right? Yeah. Federer, Djokovic, everybody knows. So usually when people decide they want to be a litigator, they've heard about Nariman, they know about Salve, they know. So they're now, because of VC, YouTube streaming, they know about some of the lesser known lawyers, but still the top lawyers. And the question is, am I going to be, that is what I want to be, that is what I can do, that's what I want to be. But even in tennis, let's say I follow tennis very closely. I still know only the top 32 players who are playing in Wimbledon. Maybe I know another 10, 15 people who used to be in the top 10, but then, now have dropped down. Yeah. This current Wimbledon, which is going on right now, there are 128 players playing, out of which, let's say 80 on both sides, men and the women's each. I really I would see their names in the match schedule and I would just pass by. I wouldn't give a damn about them, right? Then, and that's not the entire tennis pro circuit. Then there's another 200 players or so who have the ability to get into these Grand Slams, get those rankings. So they play a lesser level of tournaments with lesser prize monies and trying to get into this, the top 100, 128 so that they can compete for the Grand Slams. But it doesn't end there also. There's another set of a large number of maybe 2,000, 3,000 pro tennis players who probably are never going to go beyond the 300th rank. And the reason I'm saying this is because there was a really beautiful article in The Guardian just last month about one of these players who was under 300. And he would talk about his life. He would have to go, for example, he would stay in hostels. He would win a tournament and he would get like $450, which also would include his airfare, etc. So he's barely making money, which means that he's going and playing in like all these really fantastic locations, but he doesn't have enough money to go and see those places. He doesn't have money to go and like party like a lot of his other contemporaries. So he's frustrated, he's unhappy, but he's also a pro tennis player. He's playing and like, for example, if in our city, for instance, it's only players like those who are playing in the tournaments that are here. Now, the same example for litigators. Now, what is it that we define as success? Is it being the top 10, getting paid like like 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs a hearing? Is it the next like the lawyers who have reasonably good practice? They're probably not the name that everybody first mentions, but still they're known for it. But probably we're all still in that level of the next set of people who probably like very soon at some point will break into the top 100. And then there is a large number of people who probably are not going to get even there. Now, all of this is possible. And statistically, there's no guarantee that you will be in the top 10, right? So when people take this decision, I'm not sure like people really realize that statistically somebody like Arvind Datar is more abnormal success rather than somebody. So I'm not saying that you can work, you can't work hard and become successful, but it's also likely that you'll work really hard and not be successful. Not be successful at that level. But at the same time, you will still have some level of success, right? So, for instance, what are the things that it takes to be a good lawyer, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that anyway, like people know. I was just thinking about this. For example, the amount of reading that we have to do, right? Most people, when they send their kids out to study law, what is the argument? Like, oh, this person is arguing a lot, therefore they'll be great as lawyers, right? And then we start practice, and then we realize that most of we're reading, say, 70-page judgments overnight. And a criminal matter judgment is at least it's interesting. What about a service law judgment? It is extremely boring, right? But you still have to read it. And they're referring to other judgments. Then you have to go and read those judgments. Like, that's a lot of grunt work that I'm not sure a lot of people are they think that they are cut out to be. And then there's a whole other issue of the fact that we are all like attention starved. I mean, I have an attention problem. So I might put time out to read this entire judgment, but it's not like I'm sitting and reading it all. I'm not going to be able to finish it unless it's really pressing. So that's one thing. And again, it doesn't mean that there are enough of lawyers who are practicing pretty well without that level of reading. But again, that's a difference between are you like a top lawyer or somebody who's still struggling to make it. And it's quite likely that you'll still make a decent living in that category. But so you should be clear as to whether that's all right for you. Then the other thing that I notice among lawyers today is the amount of negativity and among practicing lawyers. And I can see where it is coming from because, one, it is not an easy profession to get into. It helps that you have godfathers. It helps that you have connections, all of that. But at the same time, there are enough of people who have those who don't have those connections and still manage to make it. Again, those are not the rules. Those are exceptions. Then you go to a court. The amount of you might have a great case, but that day, for some reason, you might lose it. Especially in your early days, it'll really hit you bad. Even worse, losing a case is still understandable. Sometimes, the case just doesn't reach, or the case doesn't get heard. I mean, you can have 10 hearings before finally the judge decides to hear you. Now, you are sitting with yourself, especially if you're an independent litigator, and trying to understand why is it that the judge is refusing to hear my case when he's hearing everything else. And secondly, you're having to explain to the client as to why your case is not being heard because they think that it's because you're incompetent or probably you're too young.
And you don't know the tricks of the court.
And because, exactly. And then the client wants you to shout at the judge, you say that, say this, but then you know that if you do that, you're just probably just going to invite a bad order. So you don't want to do that either. So that's the legal side of it. So there is the negativity, there is all of that you'll have to deal with. Again, I'm not saying that you will not make it because of this, but it is a slog, and you should be willing to do it, and it's not easy. Then there's a business side of it, which is, if I knew when I started that my success as a lawyer is probably going to be at least half of it my ability to generate business, probably I wouldn't have started, because I'm not from a business family. I mean, now that I'm in it, I'm doing it.
Yeah, you're forced to do it.
You're forced to do it.
Yeah.
But it is very essentially a part of building a practice as a lawyer. And it's not just about money. And see, the problem is we think of business as a bad word because it's about how much money you're making. I'm saying, and you would know this, as a young lawyer, you grow only when you have a lot of clients, right? If you have one case a day, and one case a day is something that a lot of people only dream of, it's still a boring life. Like, you will enjoy the thrill of litigation only if you have a lot of cases. Now, where are those cases going to come from? It's going to come from those contacts, if you don't have the contacts. So it helps if you are a second generation, third generation lawyer. But as a first generation lawyer, then you'll have to put in that extra effort to go and be seen. How you do it is for you to figure out. And also because, again, I'm a very private person. I'm not an extroverted person. I don't probably go to parties and stuff. So again, that's something that you'll have to be ready for. Again, it doesn't mean that you'll have to figure out your own way around it. But there's a fourth point that recently somebody explained to me. And this is a term called as entrepreneurial self-efficacy. And it's an area of entrepreneurial studies today. So basically, it is the characters and traits that you need to be a good entrepreneur. And the way I would see it is, for instance, look at some of these the entrepreneurial families in India, right? There's a certain trait they already have in terms of we are going to be successful, and we are in the business of making money, right? And that ability to look at things from an entrepreneurial point of view, even though our practice is like, I can't work only with clients who pay me a lot of money. Like, that just doesn't work. But at some point, I need to have that bent. And that's something I never had. So again, these are things that we're learning. And like in our case, a lot of us are learning on the job, right? And sometimes it takes years. And like the amount of money that we're willing to spend, let's say on going to a conference, a lot of people are happy to spend those money because they know that they will get work out of it. A lot of young lawyers, especially first generation lawyers, are reluctant because it's a cost they see it as. So what I'm trying to say is the attitude towards work and business makes a lot of difference. And so that's what ESE actually describes. And so there are a lot of these things that you need to fall in place, and you can make it, and sometimes you don't have to be all of it and great at all of it, but then you probably are going to be looking at a lower level of success, which still is great for a lot of people, right? So you just need to know what you're getting into and be happy with the level of success that it comes from. Not everybody is going to be Dr. Abhishek Manu Singh.
So, and that's a fantastic answer. Actually, it gives us a few points to think about. You said you must be willing to slog, read, because that's what the profession really demands of you. You must be willing to accept the fact that not everybody is going to reach that top 10. You're not necessarily going to be on YouTube for the remainder part of your life. And you said you must be willing to have that entrepreneurial mindset. You obviously can't only work for money, but you will need to have some consideration at the back of your head. You have to market, you have to network. how you do it is for you to figure out. But I want to sort of get deeper into this marketing and the networking bit, especially because of the Madras High Court judgment also, which you were mentioning to me a few minutes earlier. How do you view the possibility of marketing and networking, especially for a first generation lawyer, when there are all these rules that the Bar Council imposes, saying that it is your duty to your fellow advocates that you will not solicit work, that you will not advertise? It's a bit, maybe it is self-contradictory. I'm not necessarily saying it is, but what's your view on how these activities of networking, etc., can be done? Where do you go? Do you go to a conference? Do you write emails? Do you do LinkedIn? Do you go to parties? Like you said, you're not very fond of going to parties. What are the ways in which networking takes place usually in a litigation setting for a litigator?
So let me come to the judgment first. So India, advertising is banned, and we've probably seen those really famous ads from America about like these ambulance chasers, basically, and having like jingles about like, come, we are the law firm which will get you these returns. And I think we can all agree that that is not good. Okay. There are, however, this judgment, the Madras High Court judgment, was about some lawyers apparently who were listed on Sulekha or Quicker, some of those sites. And I get that we see ourselves as a profession that shouldn't be seen in, like, because I think the judge also took offense to the fact that the lawyer was listed next to a home cleaner and so on.
Oh.
I mean, I can understand where that is coming from. But at the same time, again, remember, those lawyers who are in that rank 300 and below, the tennis equivalent, see, for them, these are the only ways that they are going to get a lot of work. And we shouldn't look down on them. Yeah? So as long as somebody is just putting their name out, being on a place, for example, there's Upwork and places like that, I have a problem with both the Bar Council and the judges who say that, see, you shouldn't do that, because we're being really blind to the realities of the profession. Now, even among, forgetting that particular judgment, if you're a second generation lawyer, third generation lawyer, or let's say even if you're a first generation lawyer, we know enough of senior counsels who are, and who are massively networked. And these networks can come from the law college that they come from. So the national law schools, for instance, they're very good at passing work among themselves. So how does somebody who's not part of those cliques actually manage to get seen as a question?
That's really the heart of the question. How do you crack through that network?
So, I'm going to give you a different perspective. Even those people, still, for example, on their vacations, and I'm talking about really senior counsels, still go and meet lawyers in the high courts, even at the top of their career. They do that. Now, if they can do that, why is it that people like us can't? And I don't think there's anything wrong in doing that. Again, people use LinkedIn a lot. Again, how you use LinkedIn makes a lot of difference, because if you're just going to say that, hey, I got 78 clients today and I'm really tired dealing with them, nobody believes that, right? But at the same time, it's a good place to reach people. If there is a brand that you've created, people at least know that this is the kind of person, and these are the areas of law and so on. So some level of in moderation, just being seen, being heard helps. Having said that, I can also tell you that it's not so easy to be seen, let's say in a newspaper article. For example, journalists can be, having been a journalist and knowing a lot of other journalists, they can be horrible gatekeepers. They would prefer highlighting somebody who is already a law firm partner, because they again prefer like the larger brands. Getting an article published in a newspaper for a lot of young lawyers is not going to be easy, simply because the newspaper editor is not even going to consider your article, irrespective of the merits of your argument, right? The one good thing about the last 5 years, perhaps, is you don't need to go through these gatekeepers, even LinkedIn, but also just having a blog where you're writing about things that interest you. And if you're good, and if you have at least a bunch of friends who can like take it out, share it with others, that's still good enough. I mean, people come to know about you, right? That certainly helps. And again, the choice is between like complaining about the fact that it's a hostile world, and doing what we can. It's not easy, and like I said, like probably like you need to really take a hard look as to whether this is what you want to do. But if you decide you're going to do it, then these are some of the things that you can do: be seen, be heard, and build connections. For example, you talked about networking. So much of networking is about like, you go to the people, ask them like what work that they can give you, and that just doesn't work, because like the moment like you're pitching, like a lot of people just tend to switch off. But how can we be people who also help other people? How can we be connectors? I mean, there's enough on the internet about this. I'll probably just be repeating what is already out there. But these are things that can be done. Be a professional who helps other people also build their business, because everybody is looking to build business, right? So I think those approaches really help.
Yeah, that's a very important point. In fact, in one of the earlier episodes, also one of the guests said something very similar. The key part of this profession is helping those who are around you, and not just being I'll hog all the matters. I'll just not try and pass off anything. So I think you mentioned very wonderfully that you're not. All of us are not going to be at the top 10. We're not going to be maybe even senior advocates, all of us. One connected question I have is that sort of the only goal that you see most people having? I've always wondered that when you enter litigation, does everybody enter with the goal of, I want to be a senior advocate who's running around courts, being briefed left, right, and center by top firms or other lawyers or whichever kind of law I want to do? Or are there other lawyers who want a more sort of, how do I put it, a life that is away from the limelight, that I want a more undercover kind of an existence? I might brief senior advocates, but I will not myself be this chased after counsel who wants to appear and argue in court. I want a stable life. I want a decent leisure time for myself. And I ask you this because I saw this wonderful thing on your LinkedIn profile where you say, I take my leisure time very seriously. And you have this commonly repeated concern about the profession that work-life balance is horrible. You have really no leisure time. So I just want to know, are there people who really start off believing that I don't want that life where I will not have leisure time for myself? I don't want to be the busiest advocate, whether I'm senior or non-senior. I don't want to be the busiest one. I'm happy being reasonably busy, but also reasonably free.
So I think I am a great example for that. When I started, I wanted to be probably the top lawyer, and then I realized that that's not going to happen, and probably my desire for that to happen also just went down, because also you see their life and you know that, see, ultimately that is not the life that you want, right? Leisure is slightly different, but even in terms of what you want from the profession, there are enough of people who are happy being solicitors, as normally they categorized, or sometimes we call them briefing lawyers. But basically, lawyers who are not necessarily arguing in courts and not necessarily having a thriving practice, like a huge, like an extremely busy practice, and that's also totally fine. And I think at some point, most people veer towards that path. That's something that normally, even if like the profession will take you there irrespective, because I don't think like the level of intensity that is required to be the top 10 is something that most people can't really put. And the same reason why like so many people don't become top tennis players and top badminton players, because it's not just the effort that you're putting in, it's a lot of things, and everything has to work together. And at some point, like not everybody has the circumstances and the desire to put in that effort. Having said that, my concern with a lot of young lawyers is who are starting with the profession is that they are not thinking, again, different levels of things that you can do as a litigating lawyer is not being considered. And what happens is, again, if you're just thinking as a litigating lawyer, you're just imagine, as a litigating lawyer, people come to you when there's a case. You're not really like clients. Usually, they are already at their wits' end. There is something, and for example, if you're a Supreme Court lawyer, for instance, they've already like gone through like rounds of litigation and they've come. So now you just need to tell them how best to fight this case. You're not saying anything constructive from a point of how can you arrange your businesses in such a way that you won't get into trouble later, right? And we're so ingrained in that way of reactive thinking as to like, this is the case that can be filed. This is how judges will react. So when 10 years, 15 years down the line, when people want to move out of litigation and get into, let's say, an in-house position, they find themselves quite unemployable, not because they're bad litigators, but because this is the only approach they have.
Solve the immediate problem at hand.
Yes, there's no vision, and there's no, like, for example, before a problem happens, you're not able to structure, you're not able to give the management, let's say, the confidence that, see, this is what you do so that you don't get into trouble. Now, India is very difficult because as it is, like, we know, like, how courts can be uncertain, how processes can be uncertain. But even then, I believe that clients definitely deserve to get better advice in terms of how to structure their affairs from lawyers, probably. And I personally feel that litigating lawyers are possibly at the best place to advise them, simply because we see how these cases end. So we're in the best place to advise them how not to get into litigation to start with. I feel that this single-minded approach towards litigation, a lot of people are then taking themselves out of every other possibility that is there in that the career might offer.
Yeah, actually, it's a great segue into what I really wanted to ask you next about clients also. Because at that moment, perhaps when the client comes to you and says, I have this Supreme Court matter, it's very urgent, I'm at my wit's end, the client is probably first interested in that immediate solution. But what is really good for the client, as you mentioned, is that individual solution aside, a larger scheme of things that can, prevention is better than cure, basically. And what is it that clients expect from their lawyers when they come to them? And these expectations are also geared in various categories. One is they will ask you questions like, how much will you charge? What are the chances of success in my case? There are some common questions that lawyers get asked. And how do you answer these questions? So what are their expectations and how do you sort of deal with them?
Okay, I'll answer this in two sections.
How long will my case take?
Yes.
This is also
so one of my current difficulties that I'm facing at this particular point in my career is an inability to confidently tell them that, see, this is how long it'll take. And simply because, and I feel that our judges have to take the blame for this. There might be a simple matter and it might be something that takes like half an hour of hearing. But if you're going to like hear it only after 10 hearings, after 15 hearings, and after like several months, it's one, the client has a problem. But also just think about the impact it has on, let's say, younger lawyers who they always are claiming to protect and promote, because the economics just doesn't work. Because most of these lawyers, most of these clients who come to younger lawyers and maybe less established lawyers, they come with smaller issues. I'll give you a great example. This friend of mine, in fact, recently called me saying that he wants to withdraw a case. He had a claim of 4.5 lakhs against a company. Okay. Now, a year later, he went to a lawyer who helped him file a suit. He's paid 1.5 lakh in court fees. In lawyer fees, and the case hasn't moved. Which, I mean, I'm sure the pleadings are over, but the hearings haven't started. But then the judge wasn't present for a few days. The lawyer probably charged for those days also. I mean, he had a bunch of complaints. Now, if hearing, there are going to be so many hearings, especially at the High Court, etc. how does it become economical for young lawyers is a question that actually the profession needs to ask itself, simply because a lot of us don't charge by the hearing. It's usually a lump sum. The client wants a lump sum. Now, I have, at least over the last years, I've started telling people, even people I've earlier used to quote lump sum fees. It just doesn't help. I can't give you a lump sum quote. How long does a court hearing, this case takes? It really should be a half an hour job, except that half an hour could happen after several years. Yeah. Yes. Now, I'm not sure, as a lawyer, what is the right way to, and there's no way to sugarcoat this. And this is something I feel the judiciary has to take a long, hard look at. And there's this statistic that I've been telling a couple of people. There's a India Justice report, which, and they look a lot, they have a lot of data about Indian criminal system. So in 2023, the percentage of under-trials in Indian courts were around 68%. Okay, that is 2 out of 3 people are people who aren't in jail. Sorry, are people who aren't convicted yet. 10 years ago, in 2013, that number was 33%. A number around that. I don't have the exact numbers. If it is, and this is a huge jump, right? And nobody is doing anything about it, which means that there's no reason why this cannot be 90% in another 5 years. And that's we, as a profession, we should be alarmed. We should be sitting and this is what we should be addressing on priority. But I don't see anybody doing it. So pendency, which is how long will my case take? I'm not sure there's an answer. I can only be truthful to my clients by saying that, see, I really don't know. I can try my best to get it fast, accelerate it. In terms of lump sum, I'm trying not to give lump sum amounts, though a lot of clients would want lump sum amounts, at least. So then you'd say that okay, this is for a year, or maybe I'm trying to make it a per hearing thing. Yeah. What was the other question you asked?
How long will my case take? What are the chances of success?
See, chances of success, I think clients are realistic in the sense that they also know that there is nothing known as a 100% case.
Or maybe your clients.
Yeah, I don't know. At least the people, people are disillusioned with the system anyway. So I think they realize.
But I think a lot of people, what they do is they will ask around in their circle, in their non-lawyer circles first, about what do you think about my case. And some of them, especially in service law and criminal law, where most of your peers are either similarly placed employees or similarly placed accused persons or whatever. And then they will come to you and say, you know what my peers were saying, that this is a great case.
No, there's an even bigger problem, which is that they will go to the local lawyer in Ernakulam or in Shimoga, and the lawyer will say that, oh, you have a great case. I mean, you should win this case. And that's a lawyer who's telling them. And it's probably the lawyer's ignorance, right? So, it comes with the profession. I don't think you can do anything about it. But having said that, since you asked about what clients really want, there are a couple of other points that I wanted to also talk about. One, and more from a person who's just starting a career and looking at what are the things that I need to be prepared for when I talk to a client. And especially these younger lawyers, the students, they ask me see, what is it that I need to read? Should I specialize that? And I say, just read as much as you can and as wide as you can. If a client comes to me, I'm not impressing me by my knowledge of the law of that subject. They relate to me because I can speak their industry, right? So if let's say they have an insurance problem or they have a pharma problem, they want a lawyer who they won't have to explain the basics to, right? And your reading and generally being interested, including the newspapers, just generally being interested in what's happening in all sectors, just helps you have those first conversations with the lawyer. With a potential client, and you'll be amazed at how many clients are willing to trust you more just because you seem to be understanding what they're trying to say, and you seem to know some bits of the law. For example, let's say somebody who's in trouble for selling fake drugs, comes to you. You don't need to know everything in the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. I mean, like, you can look up the law.
Yeah.
But to be able to know that, see, this is how the industry works. So those are things that I feel that these are things that within our control. You don't have to be like, a lawyer family to be able to do it. These are things that we can do. Just be curious, be interested, have conversations with people around it, and just increase like the range of your knowledge. So that's one thing. The second thing is clients also, again, probably it goes a little closer to what I said earlier about that very narrow focus that litigating lawyers have. Yes, when they come to you with a problem, it's a problem solution that they want. But for a vast number of potential clients, the value that you're giving to them is how you can help them with their business, right? So, and it's a huge difference in approach. Like, if you're just going to say that, see, this is the problem, this is how you solve it, it'll solve the problem. But a lot of the value that a lawyer can bring is really helping businesses, one, structure their the way they do their transactions. I'll give you an example. For example, I draft a lot of contracts for companies, especially newer companies. And companies know what it is that they're going to do in their business. When I say companies, I mean the founders. They also know what are the normal problems that will happen. But when you draft your contracts, that you realize that, but have you considered that this might happen? And how have you dealt with the liability that might happen because of that? Like, recently we were working with a company that's in geriatric tech. So now they will have care workers in old people's homes. Now, old people could also have dementia and they could be violent. Now, when they're violent, you will need to restrain them. There might be some force that is required. Now, how do you ensure that liability is minimized? Also, when the founder is speaking to you, they say that, okay, fine, we will take consent from the son who is engaging us and who is paying us. But there's probably like other children who are going to fight with this son for the will later on. So, like, probably just getting a sign off initially, it doesn't help. So you need to have proper exclusion of liability provisions, etc. So there's a lot of that kind of thinking that litigating lawyers and generally lawyers should do and have to do. So I feel that these are the two areas that today our clients are facing. They're not able to relate to the lawyer. The lawyer is coming to them with a solution to a problem, but there's nothing constructive being told in terms of like how they can avoid problems later on. And secondly, they're speaking in like probably lawyers just should equip themselves to be able to understand different industries. And those are things that probably young lawyers can actually focus on doing.
So thank you for that. And just I wanted to circle back to the question on leisure. And also, because we're talking about what clients expect from you, this is a related question of how do you deal with the fact that you are just starting out and you are now pitching yourself to a client. It may be easier if you have, if most of your hair, pedigree and most of your hair is grey. But if you are visibly 1 year or 2 years out of law school, 4 years out of law school, or just started independent practice, what are some things that you can sort of keep in mind? Because there's one aspect of it which is just be honest with the client and say, boss, I have never dealt with a matter like this. This is going to be my first. And then hope that the client will sort of trust their livelihood or whatever it is at stake in you. But how do you navigate? Are there some problems like this that you faced?
I'm just reminded of the first case that I got, and which I mangled so badly. So again, July of 2016, I decided to set up practice. So I've gone to Kerala, I've gone to the High Court. Some lawyer is very impressed by me. So by the time I reached Delhi, he called saying that, see, there is this client who needs to file a case in the National Consumer Commission. because the state commission has dismissed his case without hearing him, or he has allowed the other side without hearing this person, and there's a huge delay. So I look at the documents, I look at the law, I feel that this is a horrible case, and I feel morally obliged to tell the client that this is a bad case. And the first time the client says that, see, I know it's not a case. Oh no, I speak to the lawyer, and he says that, yeah, I know it's a bad case, just file the case. But then I'm still not satisfied, because then I need to tell the client that, see, this is what I feel. And then I clearly overdid it, that then the client disappeared. So, and again, we learn, right?
Yeah.
We can be a little too scrupulous about it. But I feel that most clients realize that their case is not a 100% case, because especially when we're working in appellate tribunals, our clients are coming to us because they've lost the case, right? So we can be honest, I believe that most people know like how courts work enough that, especially in the Supreme Court, that there is some amount of uncertainty of outcomes. So I feel that it's okay to be fairly forthright with clients. At the same time, you can't come across as a novice. And again, how do you come across as a novice? By knowing nothing about the subject.
Or the industry.
Or the industry. So at least there are some things that you can already arm yourself with that will help you have those conversations that give confidence. Now, it still doesn't answer the question of, okay, how do you manage when you're still a novice? But like I said, the first case that I got was from somebody who knew me and who had a very clear-cut case. They didn't want to go to a very senior lawyer and pay a lot of money. So they were happy giving a fresher a chance. And then it's those building blocks that you then build on, and then think of it as a staircase, and then you climb one step at a time. So when you start, you're obviously not getting the cream of litigation or the cream of cases. Take whatever you get and go on to the next step. One question that always comes, and it's something that's bothered me also, is about specialization. I believe that lawyers are necessarily people who aren't restricted to one area. Having said that, today, you and I are litigating lawyers. What is a confidence with which we can give advice to a client, not in a litigation space, but in terms of what they should do, right? That is something that will come from specialization, right? To know, for example, employment laws in and out, so that you don't miss each circular, because you might be a half-assed lawyer, you might not know everything, but the fact that you missed that one circular that did come out somewhere 3 years ago, and it's not on the internet, and it doesn't come up in your basic research, is not good enough a reason when the client then has to speak to the labor commissioner. So at some point, there is some benefits for specialization, and you'll have to pick what is your area. You can be a specialist in a securities law. The world needs people like that. But at the same time, there are some benefits to being a generalist law. The payoffs are different. Probably as a generalist, again, your level of success is probably at a much higher level. When you're starting, everybody should be a generalist for a few years, just so that you get you can't give, let's say, an IP law advice without knowing how criminal law works, right? Or let's say even contracts without knowing how a different branch of law. Clients come to you for the law. They don't come to you for IP law advice. So that's, I feel that those are things that, at least at the initial stage, people should be a generalist, and then decide once you've also learned more about yourself, about what your ultimate goals are, which I think 4 or 5 years down the line, you would have a better idea. You can take a call as to then how do you want to take the next step. You mentioned, I believe you mentioned about how do you know while you're in your career, how I'm doing.
Yeah. Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? Now I'm 7 years, 5 years, 9 years into practice. Is this good? Somebody will ask me, oh, how's your practice going? Now, beyond the point, I don't know how to answer that question. I can say, okay, I have enough matters to keep me busy.
Yeah.
That's the best answer I can manage. But is there more to it? Are there ways I can evaluate myself?
Yeah. No. So again, one of my former bosses would just give this. I don't know how helpful the advice is because it wasn't exactly helpful to me, but I think this is the only advice there is. See, on an annual basis, is your practice growing? Is your revenue growing? And at least the earlier years, it was doubling for me. But then that was on such a low base that probably it would double. But at some point, as long as it grows, I think it's fine. I would say there is one more element that you should consider, which is, are you growing as a lawyer? And do you feel more confident about the advice that you're giving? Are you giving more value? Think in terms of value, the value that you're giving to a client, right? Is, I think, one way to measure this. Measuring with your peers probably is the worst thing we can do, because especially lawyers have a way of making it sound like they're super busy and they're way more successful than they actually are. So, and you know your reality and you know the impression that they're giving out. So, and it's probably possible they are successful also, but probably using that as a metric probably is not going to be helpful. But are you enjoying the work? Are you learning more? Are you still able to keep yourself motivated? And at some point, there has to be a number, both in terms of both revenue as well as amount of work that you're doing. What you can measure just helps you take better decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And since you mentioned the areas of work, and you said, and I think this is an advice that's consistently resonated even on the previous episodes. First, be a generalist, spend a few years, then decide. Do you think there are certain fields of law that are sort of more amenable to giving you a better income? Like somebody usually says, oh, I do civil commercial side practice, and somebody else says, oh, I do a criminal side practice. And I think at least the sense that I've got is in a general sense, at least you look at a young lawyer who says, I work on the criminal side, and you'll just assume that they make a little less money as compared to the one who's doing civil commercial work. But is that true? Are there certain fields that are bound to get you into a better place as far as finance is concerned?
So, for instance, there's a simpler answer, which is that ultimately the money that you make is the money that you've asked your client for. Yeah. So, if you're not good at asking for money, then I mean, you can be in the most lucrative field, and again, coming back to the business mentality, a lot of us are not cut out for asking for money. I mean, like, it depends on like how you grew up, the values that you're. And when I say values, I don't even mean it from a good moral point as much as, see, some people are not growing up with a lot of money or seeing a lot of money. So then when you're quoting a fee to the client, you're thinking as to, like, can the client afford that? But probably it can be something. Probably they're coming from a completely different circumstance. So you need to have some of those. But having said that, for instance, divorce cases is known to give a certain amount of, is known to be lucrative, especially for people who are like much younger in their careers compared to other options. But then there's also the aspect of, do you enjoy doing it? Again, at some point, like maybe like 6-7 years into your career, the question that you should be asking is, now what is it that I can be charging a premium for? Yeah. So, and that again comes back to the old question of, like, what is the value that I'm able to give the client, especially compared to another lawyer that they would go to of a similar or slightly better, I mean, like more years, a lawyer with more years. Am I able to give more value to them? And is there a premium that I can charge from them? So I don't think you need to focus so much on this area of law being better. For instance, service law. There is so many people like making so much of money around it. People who represent religious organizations, you know the kind of money that they make. But one, you need to be cut out for that. You need to enjoy that. And so for everybody who's making a lot of money in a particular field of law, there's always going to be other people who are not making a lot of money in that field of law. So actually, the field of law is not what matters as much as how you like it and how you're able to bring in value there.
Right. That's such a good answer, and thank you for that. And now I want to circle back to the last most important question, which is, I think it got lost in our discussion, which is about leisure time and
We'll come back.
and you work hard, you slog, ask for money, etc. Now you need time to spend that money. And so what's your take on that?
So again, I said, when I started, I didn't want to be that lawyer who's working till 2 a.m. every day. It's not that we don't work past midnight on some days, but it's stopped, especially in the Supreme Court. It's quite predictable. So you like, those days can happen when you have to work extra, but most of the time you can predict what is expected. So if you're expecting a slightly tough day, then you start preparing in advance, etc. I don't believe in people who are working all the time. I don't believe they're working all the time, or they're just indisciplined.
Yeah.
So on leisure, a couple of things. I make sure that I take some of my breaks. For example, my Sundays, like today, I try not to keep meetings. So if somebody asks me for something on a Saturday evening, unless it's urgent, I will say that let's have a call on Monday. So I don't believe that, lawyers should be available all the time. Though, again, if you're a criminal lawyer who does bails, then that's a life you're signing up for. And there's no, then you don't complain about it. But again, that's your choice, right? I don't want to be that. The good thing about being a Supreme Court lawyer is also that the we have a good a very generous holiday calendar. At least till last year, I used to take those week-long holidays to travel. Also, travel is also where you get to meet other lawyers, so that's there. But I'm saying that sometimes you travel for the sake of traveling. For example, the latest thing that is basically a bunch of us, and most of it is lawyers. Like, in fact, it started on a WhatsApp group by an IP lawyer called Asta in Noida. So we get together to play football or badminton or different games in the evenings, sometimes on weekday evenings also. So now, because that is there, now I make sure that my earlier in the day is planned much better, so that I can go and play football, which is a great recreation, I would say. The other thing for young lawyers, make sure that your diet is taken care of. Just eat well, because especially a lot of young people who come to the city, they're living alone, so they try to skip meals. I'm not sure that's great for the long term. And especially, this is a profession where you're really looking after your own back. Therefore, you need to do these things. Working out is important. The number of lawyers I know who are also suffering from mental health issues, it is not small. So I think these are things that I think we need to take care of. I don't think there's a lot of people shouldn't take so much of pride in calling themselves workaholics, especially when you don't have so much of work. Most work that most people our age have is something that can be managed, is what I think.
Thank you so much, Abraham, for that wonderful.
It was a pleasure talking.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely very useful, and I think some of the things we touched on in this episode have not been touched on earlier, and especially the bit about clients and what they want from you. And I think this is going to be a good sort of episode. So thank you everybody for joining us, and hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any comments or questions, like always, please just drop them in the comment box, and we will read them, and we do try to incorporate them in our questionnaire for our guests every time. Thank you very much.